inaugural AAJ student chapter event. I want to thank everybody for showing up. Hope you all got a chance to sign up with AAJ, grab some dinner. In a moment we're going to hear from some of the AAJ national folks, and for those of you that don't know already, haven't read the literature already, AAJ is a fantastic national organization of trial lawyers and plaintiffs lawyers around the United States, and specifically here in Philadelphia. They have a great presence. So Anna and Catherine are going to speak. Before we start, I just want to thank the rest of the AAJ Student Chapter Executive Board, Nate Oriens, who's here. Nate, Connor Finucane could not be here. He's very sick. And we also want to especially thank our faculty advisor, Glenn Stern, who helped set everything up. We get a quick round of applause. So with that, we'll hear from Anna and Catherine about what AAJ does.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for coming. We're really excited to be here. My name is Anna Russo. I am the Senior Regional Membership Manager for AAJ, so here in the Northeast. So I actually don't work a whole lot with law schools. Catherine does more of that. But I am definitely on the ground working with a lot of trial lawyers. I live in South Philly, so I'm sort of kind of your local person. If you need coffee, call me. We'll go out for coffee. I'm actually taking classes at Pitt, so we can literally just hang out. I know nothing about the law, though. Don't ask me about that. But we're really glad you're here. We want to. I'll read it over with you. We'll try to figure it out. Catherine, though, is your main person when it comes to law school engagement. She's based out of DC. She's great. She's easy to get in touch with. Please take our cards from the table as you leave. Call us anytime. We really wanted, though, to thank Aiden and Nate and Gwen and Tom. This is such an amazing event. This is our inaugural event for kicking off the reinvigoration of our law schools. We cannot wait to brag about how awesome Drexel is next week at our national convention.
Kline School.
Okay, so sorry. I've already told Tom I'm going to wear my sweatshirt around everywhere and be like, yes, I'm one of the cool kids. So I'll make sure to take pictures and send them to y'all. But Catherine is going to give a quick overview of the benefits of your law school membership. If you haven't already joined, you can give us the application, but we highly encourage you to go ahead and join.
Thank you.
If you're not joined, you're not going to get one of the fleece shirts. So it's worth the $15. And the free meal that you get.
And if you don't join, I might lose my job. But thank you all. It's been a pleasure the past several months to be working with Gwen and Aiden and putting all of this together. As Anna said, my name is Catherine. I do know things about the law. I am actually an attorney, though not practicing, but don't ask me about evidence because that brings back nightmares.
Don't ask the notes either.
I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of some of the benefits that you might not be aware of, but we do have that form up front at the table that you get when you grab your application form. AAJ, I think a lot of people associate just with our staff competition, but we are so much more than that. Your membership gets you access to an online trial magazine, and we have plenty of copies of that out front if you want to peruse that. But the biggest thing is for you is going to be career resources and networking with local attorneys. We are hoping that past this event, we're going to have many more events, local happy hours, other networking events, so that you can connect with local attorneys and one-on-one discuss their career practice areas and what you want to practice, and any questions you may have. So by all means, as Anna said, go ahead, take our cards, contact us anytime. We are here for you, here to answer your questions, be a resource, and help connect you with the people that can help jumpstart your career. Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Okay, I was like, I want some of this.
Yeah, and you can go back like for seconds. This is billed as dinner, so like if you want seconds, like there's lots of food out there. Don't let it go to waste. Put it in your pockets before you leave. Don't leave without being full.
Thank you. So guys, just as Anna and Catherine talked about in terms of the sweatshirts, they have a list of everybody who signed up. So at the end, that way some people have to leave for an event or a trial act class. If you do, just make sure you head out, let them know that you signed up, and we'll get you a sweatshirt. Everybody else that's staying for the duration, at the end, we'll hand out a sweatshirt based on who is signed up for AAJ. So, without further ado, we are honored to have Kline with us here tonight. Tom is the preeminent trial attorney in Philadelphia and has been practicing trial law and personal injury law for longer than I have been alive. One of the named attorneys at Kline Inspector. His name is also on our building. We're fortunate to have that. He's been given every accolade you could imagine from all types of media, but just to highlight a few, he's a past president of the Inner Circle of Advocates. He was described by the Washington Post as a select group of 100 of the nation's most celebrated trial lawyers. Law Dragon, which is another fantastic publication, has summed it up nicely, calling Tom one of Philadelphia's legendary litigators, and the Philadelphia Daily News has also called him the Babe Ruth of personal injury litigation. He's handled some of the largest and most catastrophic cases in the region and in the country. Tom represented victim number 6 in the wake of Jerry Sandusky's serial sexual abuse at Penn State. He represented victims of the Amtrak accident in Philadelphia, successfully raising the damages cap on Amtrak to maximize recovery for his clients. He represents the Piazza family in the wake of Tim Piazza's death at Penn State. He successfully advocated for anti-hazing laws in Pennsylvania in the wake of Tim's death. He's also represented numerous victims of harmful medical devices, including transvaginal mesh, Risperdal, in the past Vioxx, and others. A few months ago, he got an $8 billion with a B verdict on behalf of a Risperdal victim against Johnson & Johnson here in Philadelphia. From a student perspective, Tom has over and over again done something that few lawyers have the stomach to do or the ability to do, and that is, beyond just the personal injury perspective, been able to change the law, has been confident in taking cases up to the Pennsylvania Appellate Court, the Superior Court, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, along with a team of fantastic lawyers at Kline Inspector, including Chip, obviously. And from a student perspective, I think that's something that few, if any, lawyers have the opportunity to do. So without further ado, Tom.
So thank you for coming. When we put this event together, my view was if we gave a free meal and added a t-shirt, by the way, AAJ has a bunch of swag out there which you want to raid and take from them, from their table, that maybe we'd attract a crowd. So it goes to show you, no matter who you have speak, if you give a free meal, you can get a crowd. I have advocated to have an AAJ chapter on campus for quite a while. Dean Oates knows that, Dean Filler certainly knows that, and Gwen certainly knows that as well. I am a trial lawyer. When, in case you missed that marble statue, I'm not dead yet, but it says trial lawyer. That's what I am, and that's my profession, and that carries with it a connotation. AAJ actually, in a prior naming, was the American Trial Lawyers Association. And we went through a period when trial lawyers and the civil justice system were under attack, and it still is under attack, our civil justice system, every day. Obtaining justice in this country is not something that's automatic. It's something that lawyers have to work at every day, and trial lawyers are the ones who are the soldiers in that war every day. And so when someone says that they are a trial lawyer, that to me connotates a certain meaning. The American Association of Justice is that organization at a national level which promotes the civil justice system so that every person has truly, not just lip service, but truly the ability to obtain a remedy at law. If you walk through the exhibit hall in our Trial Advocacy Institute at 12th and Chestnut, you will see that I organized the exhibit around advocacy, remedy, accountability, and reform. And at its core, we are advocates. We represent clients, so clients seek a remedy, whether it be a jury verdict or an acquittal in a criminal trial. We all want to see others accountable. That's the very core and very root of the civil justice system. And hopefully we can obtain reform. And It's a lofty goal, but it is what makes the it is what makes the civil justice system what it is, and it is what keeps the courthouse open. I would say a couple of things about AAJ, because they've been kind to us, and we want to be a model. If there's a law school which happens to be named after a trial lawyer, then we should open our doors to not only the Federalist Society, which I understand there's an active chapter here, and that's great too, but we should think about it as a career, and we should be thinking about it as a perpetuation of a well-ingrained, well-established, well-organized group of lawyers who are committed to the justice system in America. We have active chapters in the Pennsylvania Association of Justice and the Philadelphia Trial Lawyers. Philadelphia Trial Lawyers kept the old-fashioned name, but it is nevertheless all one blended group at the state, the local, and the national level. What's in it for you? What's in it for you is hopefully this chapter will bring to our law school lawyers, Bob Mongaluzzi, who Aiden works in his office, as well as other lawyers, professors with ideas, and hopefully we can germinate and breed a culture in this small group which will grow. If I'm invited back, I'll come back as many times as you'll have me, and where we can have discussions about those things which count in promoting justice for people who are harmed by others, whether it be by faulty medical devices, whether it be by medical malpractice, sexual abuse. Our office has undertaken sex trafficking cases, and many people who desperately need recourse in the courts. That's the purpose of the group. That's the purpose of our being together. How many of you are thinking about someday I might want to be a trial lawyer and be and represent people who are victims of some tragedy? Okay. And how many are here for just the free meal? Yes. I am here tonight with 3 graduates of the Kline School of Law. Zach Kline, a playwright by profession, 2012. Ms. Jimenez, who's conquering the world as a lawyer, a Kline inspector, 2011. And Brittany Schoenbeck over here, 2017. We are all in this together. Zach and I have collaborated on something called Dylan and the Law, which is shown at your local theater every once in a while live. And if you're a Bob Dylan fan, come along for that. So my purpose today is to, how many are leaving? Where are the people who are actually leaving and going? Okay, like every 2L that's in the room who's in the trial act class. We are, my purpose today is to talk with you, not at you. And I would like to talk about the profession of being a trial lawyer, what goes into it, and anything else which is on your mind. We're having dinner together, is my view. So let's have a discussion about those things. I will answer any question you want. I will answer it openly, honestly, and even tell you a story or two which shouldn't be on any videotape. I know, but we do that for everything. Then we will treat that like Igor Furman's videotape. Come on, who got it? Who got it? Yeah, okay. He's the guy who went to the secret donor meeting with Trump, put his phone down on the table, and nobody thought that he was recording. So all of that. By the way, if you want to see evidence, like for fun, I don't want to get into politics, but like evidence, I know you don't have time to. How many are 1Ls? You definitely don't have time to. But that is a tape worth listening to. That's what is happening right now in the United States of America where we all live, and which, by the way, you as guardians of the courthouse are inheriting. So let's go. I did this recently. You're mostly 1Ls. I did this most recently at my alma mater, Duquesne. They had a lunch with me, little old me, and we had lots of discussion and a lot of fun. So no question gets a penalty. No question is off limits, although I'll deflect it if I don't want to answer it. And let's have a talk. Who's first? Yes.
Hi, my name's Elaine. I'm Foster Arm. So we have heard about all of your accolades and all of your successes as a trial attorney. I wanted to know first.
Which ones to believe?
I wanted to know, in your opinion, what do you think it is that you do that makes you great?
Well, I don't know if I'm great or not. I can tell you what I've done for 41 years is to work hard. I believe that preparation is at the core of being successful in the courtroom, but I believe something more. I believe you have to believe in what you're doing. And I've always believed in what I'm doing. I've always undertaken causes that I thought were not only right but righteous, and I've always believed that you can do good. If you look at that, if you look at the pad on that silly statue, I would call it a silly statue, and you have that on videotape, you will see it says something good can come out of something bad, and I've lived by that. That was said by the head executive of SEPTA. How many ride SEPTA occasionally? How many like SEPTA? A few people do. You'd be struck as a juror in a plaintiff's case. But that's what I think it's all about. Doing and believing what you believe in, working hard at it, and being committed to your client. If I were in a different group, I would say it doesn't matter which side you're on, and I could say, having been through this, you could love Johnson & Johnson if you'd like to. Or you can like, as I like to say, Philip Morris if you'd like to. But my life has been living and breathing with people who need me and who I can't let down. That's been, that's always what's driven me. That and along the way, I figured out something, which was you can make a case about an individual something bigger than the individual. You can change literally the world. You can certainly change a community. You can certainly change the way a corporation acts by making them agree with you to change what they're doing, how they're doing it, and that is the root of true reform. You actually don't have a license to do that in a case that you file for monetary damages. Presumably someone is injured. In my world, they're entitled to compensation if they prove, you know the elements, come on 1Ls, you gotta prove negligence, you have to prove causation, you have to prove damages. But you can actually do more. You can sit down with them and say, I want you to change the way you do things. I've had those discussions face to face with lawyers, with the chief legal officer in the city of Philadelphia, with many others over many years, and I've convinced them to change what they're doing and to make something right. And along the way, we've had successes. Long-winded answer, but you'll get a lot of them. You get a lot of them. That's, I guess, what makes what we do great. Not how I view it makes me great. Yes.
I'm Rob Vasquez. I'm a 2L. I think one of your
2L questions get prioritized.
One of your hallmarks is that people trust you, or especially the jury, they trust you, or they believe you when you're putting on a trial. What do you think is your biggest strength, or helps you build that trust, or make yourself more credible?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think it translates into any lawyer. What builds confidence and trust? When you walk into a courtroom, how many plan to be in a courtroom someday? Like if I said, what's your vision of yourself? Right, that's what I would expect, especially in this group. When you walk in a courtroom, you actually have an uphill battle to credibility because of everything from perception about lawyers to lawyer jokes to people who don't like lawyers. There's people who don't like the system. So you can't presume I'm going to stand up, Rob, right?
Yes.
Rob, I'm going to stand up, and they're going to like me because I'm likable, and my parents like me, and my girlfriend likes me, and my classmates like me, and they're going to like me. It's not true. You have to build and earn that trust. What does that mean? That means from the time you give an opening statement, you cannot overpromise, because you're going to be judged on the promises you make and the promises you keep. An opening statement is like a campaign. You give in your campaign speech, and then your trial is your administration, and you better deliver on what you've promised. It's not a matter. Lawyers think that trials are a ratification of whether they are good or bad. I had a case one time which I actually won, but I didn't think the jury gave us enough. I won't bore you with the details. I came back to the office. I had my head sort of on the desk, at least metaphorically speaking. And my law partner, my now law partner, Shane Inspector, came in to see me, and he said to me, you know what? He said, this case wasn't about you. This case was about the facts of the case. And you have to judge a case against the merits of the case. In that same case, the phone rang a few minutes later because I left and I went like this. The case, all right, I will tell you about the case. The case involved a little baby, a premature baby, like 2 pounds, was in the neonatal intensive care unit at a very good institution within arm's reach of here called the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. A resident physician, you heard the story?
Yes.
More than once?
Yes.
That's called living with me. Like they're like sidekicks. Have you heard the story? Lost the tip of his pinky finger, and I don't know if this answers the question, but it kind of does. And the case was about what's the value of losing a pinky finger. By the way, his father was a butcher, and he had lost like his whole finger, which was in his pocket like the whole time. So that's called being a trial lawyer. It's like, that's not a fact you have to put in evidence. So the question was, they really, like, this boy was going to live his life with by the way, it was above the knuckle. I remember the case. I remember the boy, Matthew Cramlish. And the trial judge was a very nice, sometimes difficult man. He's now dead, so we only will speak nice of him. And because that's what you should do. And the question was, what's the value of the pinky finger? Children's Hospital thought it was, do it in $2019. Be an adjuster for an insurance company that holds the insurance to Children's Hospital Philadelphia. I didn't come up to talk about this, but that's what dinner conversation's about. How much is that worth? Give me a figure. Come on, somebody put 80,000. How much? Come on, somebody throw in a number. 100,000. Come on, somebody cheap. 30,000. There you go, defense lawyer. Like, out. There you go. Top number. Come on, be wild. Okay. The jury awarded $250,000, and I was, to use a legal term, pissed. And I went like this, walked out of the courthouse. I told the story of this animated before. Yeah.
Every time.
And $250,000. I left and I went like that, and I came back to the office. I had my talk with Shannon, because the first thing, if you have a great law partner, he or she will tell you the truth and calm you down. So I had that. The year, by the way, I hate to tell you this because I kind of have a sense of when you all were born. The year that this all happened was 1986 or thereabouts, maybe 84. I'd have to go back and look at the records. And the phone rings, true story. The phone rings, it was the judge. And I tried a few cases against him. I was at the time a young lawyer, not young chronologically, because I started to practice law when I was 31 and believed that I would never be able to catch up to my peers who had gone straight to law school and who had a number of years ahead of me. But I was in the process of catching up, and I wanted big verdicts. And because that's how trial lawyers kind of measure themselves, by the metrics. It's how many points have you scored, and how many rebounds do you have, and the like. So the judge on the other end said to me words which I'll remember for the rest of my life. He said, "You know what the problem with you is, Tom?" The judge calling me, "You know what the problem with you is, Tom?" And I said, "Tell me, Your Honor." He said, "You tend to believe your own bullshit." So, I guess I wasn't that likable in that case. By the way, on the other end of the spectrum, I tried a case which I believe we will have reinstated, the jury verdict which was taken away, where the conduct of a $70 billion company, which was really bad misconduct, which was heard by a very educated jury, led by a foreperson who has a master's degree and is a researcher at this university, a fact that was disclosed, brought her back in voir dire. They liked the idea of having somebody really smart, because a really smart person would know Mr. Kline was, I guess, trying to do something that was trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Wrong. I wanted somebody smart. I wanted somebody who was in research, because I knew that person would understand how bad the conduct was and would never put up with this. In that case, there was a very, very large jury verdict measured against a very large net worth. That's what that case was about, in the context of very bad conduct. And punitive damages, have you got to study punitive damages? Anybody in this room, other than the graduates here and an eminent evidence professor, among other things? Really? The purpose of punitive damages are to punish and deter. How can you deter? Are you going to deter someone from speeding again if you give them a parking ticket? Yes or no? Right. So that's what that's about. Ready for the next question? They will not always be responsive, but by the way, that's not what I promised. All the way, two L's first. Two or two L's? Yeah, go ahead.
My name's Mary Lawrence, I'm at 2L. And you mentioned when you were responding to Elena's question that your clients need you and you don't want to let them down. And I want to know how you go about choosing which clients and what causes are worth fighting for.
Well, you do have to be selective in life, don't you? And you can't do everything. You kind of learn that. I don't know that I have an exact rational answer for it. I know that a personal injury lawyer has to assess cases to some extent, not always and for all purposes, but on whether the case is, makes economic sense. Is this a claim where I'm going to invest hundreds or thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars in? And so there's a balance there. I just kind of had people knock on the door, is the truth. I mean, that's euphemistically speaking, but people call, people want me to represent them. And of course, if you have one case, it builds a reputation, so it builds another case. But in my practice, interestingly, I have been asked to do things like, how many are familiar with the Penn State death of Timothy Piazza? How many are from Penn State, by the way? Graduate from Penn State. Okay, especially his home. I had never handled a hazing case prior. By the way, and this came out much later, and since this is dinner, and since we're all best friends now, and it's kind of like a confessional, I was hazed. I was a victim of hazing, so I felt it. I didn't tell my clients or anyone else until a year later, but I never handled one of those cases. And they had the choice of hiring a lawyer who did nothing but that kind of case. Like for 30 years, my competition. oftentimes we have competitions in these cases. I have a friend who's a great preeminent lawyer in this town. Aiden currently works at his law firm, Bob Mondeluzzi. And Bob and I have undertaken these cases together. I had handled railroad cases in my lifetime, but I didn't expect to be lead counsel in the Amtrak litigation. But people came to me and they said, our loved ones died. One woman, I mean, in the world of personal injury, I, in 2004, represented many clients, hundreds of clients, in litigation involving a pain medication known as Vioxx against a corporation called Merck. And I was in the center of that litigation. Years later, the corporate secretary of Merck was horribly injured in that accident and came to me for representation. That, if you were to say to me, are there dots you can connect as to who you end up representing, that's the way. I mean, what may interest you in answering the question of my feelings and things I've gravitated to. One of the partners in our law firm is Nadeem Bazar. And Nathan's doing work with him right now. Have you had Nathan, or have you had Nadeem in any classes? He used to teach an introductory course years ago, but no longer. And he has developed a practice where he largely, not exclusively, but largely represents victims of abuse, institutional abuse, clerical abuse, and that morphed into a new part of his practice in representing victims of sex trafficking. There is a statute which was passed in Pennsylvania which gives recourse, in addition to common law remedies, to victims of sex trafficking against the commercial perpetrators, largely in that instance hotels, and sometimes large hotel chains. Those cases came to Nadeem, but I have been a consistent volunteer to be a second chair in those cases. I've met those women, I've seen the horror of it, and I believe that there are cases where you just say that I do want to do that. I do want to do that, and I can do that, and I'm capable of doing that, and I know how to do it, and I want to be helped. I want to help. So it runs the gamut to someone, today the phone rang, the email rang. Phones don't ring anymore. The email went bing, and it was a victim of a bus accident in Central Park. And tomorrow something else will happen, and I'll talk to the people, and I'll decide. I hope that is reasonably satisfactory. Other 2L questions? Yeah.
I got to see your closing arguments for the Risperdal case, and during your closing arguments...
You wrote that piece, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, it's regarding that.
Yeah.
There was this point where the train starts coming in,
Yes.
and your voice starts getting heavier and heavier to challenge the rumble of the train, and you leave the jury in suspense as the train slowly rumbles away. Was that planned?
Did I do it on purpose?
Yeah, I've been wondering that since that day.
Well, there's two things that go on in City Hall on the second floor, where I have a lot of experience. Where I last week lobbied a city councilman to fix the bathrooms because it's not fair to pay someone $9 a day and not give them a place to like where a human being would actually go to the bathroom. So there are all kinds of battles that you can fight. You can pick your battles, and that's one I've picked in City Hall. There are two things that happen. One, I run under rooms, under 275 and it's Judge Powell's courtroom and Judge Andrews' courtroom. You can hear the subway. And yes, I know it's happening. And you can't always time it perfectly. The other thing is the bells. Like you get the chimes. That's always good for a closing too. But I honestly, I read your thing, and I was flattered, and I was flattered and tickled by it. And it reminds me I have to recirculate it to people. I didn't send it to anyone. It wasn't posted on social media, which it needs to be. But that is it's, sometimes you're conscious of it, and sometimes you're just helped by dumb luck. But yeah, that is something that happened. I'm glad that you were astute enough to pick it up.
That was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, 2Ls, because I know you're going out of here. If you are 2L and you haven't asked the question, you haven't gotten your money's worth.
So we're about to leave for ITA class right now.
You're
And
doing?
We're about to leave for an intro trial ad class right now. It's at the federal courthouse with Judge Kearney. And every week he makes us look into a different attorney. So the first week it was David Boies. Last week it was Jim Beasley. And this week it's you. So one of the things that he tells us to do is like
The late great Jim Beasley.
research. Yes, the late. Research you guys and
I went
find
to the real Beasley School of Law.
Yes, yes. That's right.
I worked for Jim.
So he tells us to come in and give a good fact about you guys, what makes you so good at what you do.
Is this where you're all headed?
Yes.
So you get to get your fact?
So, I need my fact. One. Two. All right.
Do you have your fact, or do you need your fact?
Yeah, I definitely need that before I leave.
Okay.
But the second thing is,
He doesn't eat Mike and Ike's, by the way. If you got that one of those articles, I like Necco wafers. But go ahead.
yeah, I got that one. And so the second thing I was wondering about is
What's the fact? What's the fact you have, or what's the fact you want?
Well, I don't know. Whatever you want to tell me. I don't know. Anything that you want to tell me. But the second thing that I want to ask you, like seriously, this week we're learning about exhibits and how helpful they are in your case. So my question to you is, in your experience, what has been your approach to using exhibits? I don't know. Maybe give us an
Okay.
answer about that.
You remind me you're going to talk about exhibits, Tom, but something you'd want to know. There were two people in my life who told me the same thing, which I don't know that they were correct about. When I was a sixth grade school teacher. I don't know how many people in this room know that. And my mom and dad didn't want me to leave the little town of Hazleton to go to law school. I had settled in as a school teacher. My late wife, Paula, taught the fifth graders. I had the sixth graders. Life was good. I was making $13,000 a year. Paula was making 11, and it was pretty comfy, if you will. We lived in a new townhouse on Route 93 near the Culm Banks in Hazleton. And my dad and mom both made arguments, which were, why don't you stay? And my dad's was more practical than my mom. My dad essentially said that, there aren't jobs. By the way, as you will probably hear me say at commencement, because you'll all graduate, there is no undersupply of worthy causes, and there is no oversupply of great advocates to advocate for those causes. Keep that in mind if you want like a little ditty to write down in your mind. But that was my dad's argument. My mom's argument was that my dad's family was kind of rough. They were difficult people, I think you would say. And my mom viewed herself as being nice. The Levins were nice. And she told me I was too nice to be a lawyer. And I want you to fast forward. I worked for the late James E. Beasley, and in my first year of working for Jim, who was a difficult man by anyone's account. If you read you want to be a trial lawyer? Until my bio comes out, it's being written. Right now, actually, I spend days with a very skillful former journalist who's writing it. But if you want to read a great book and want to be a trial lawyer, read Courtroom Cowboy, The Life and Times of Jim Beasley. And Jim said to me, like, within my first month there, he said, I don't know, Tom, you seem to be too nice. So you can tell that fact tonight. Tom Kline is too nice. Trial exhibits in a nutshell. This will take a very short period of time. There was an old day where everything was done by poster boards. You keep in mind that I started to practice law when the fax machine was a new invention. I mean, I'm not talking about the computer was a new invention. We had fax machines in 1980. It was like, wow, you can send stuff instantly. The US mail is going by the wayside. You're a little behind that, or not much. But not much. But so we put everything on poster boards. And I know that sometimes in trial ad you do that, and there's occasions. Now, if I want to make a point to a jury, you know, I make a point about like a really important exhibit. We did this in one of our transvaginal mesh trials this year. You know what I did? I went back to a poster board. Because the jury's looking at this and that, and they're highlighting. You all know how all that works. And the PowerPoints. My thing is that's a lot of bunk. If I want to make a point now, I go back to a pencil and paper and say to a jury, they're all like here, and they're saying, what's he going to do? He blew this up. We used to have two kinds of exhibits. We used to have, in my life, in a different era. Gwen practiced in this era. But there were no putting things on a screen. We had two kinds of exhibits, and we had a name for them in our law office. This is true for your time too. Which is, we used to have the 24 by 36, which was like your conventional size blow-ups, as we called them. And then we had, if you strung two together and turned it the other way, you'd get it by two. When you really had some point to make, you'd have, in our parlance, a BMF. And I would literally say to my secretary at the time, I want this, I want you to send it out for copying and make it into a BMF. Okay. That's what that's the difference. So exhibits, in my view, are a necessary evil. I interestingly I tried 3 cases to verdict last year. About 20 weeks of my year was spent in a courtroom. That's, by any trial lawyer's account, pretty good. And I did a closing where I orchestrated the exhibits. It was an intensive exhibit closing, and I practiced it, scripted it, and actually never looked back. I had a very skillful lawyer who was working with me, who would click. She knew when to click, and I would just talk to the jury. But here's my point: most of the time in a courtroom today, don't make this mistake. Like, don't make the mistake. Lawyers talk to the blackboard. They're talking to their exhibit. You're the people I want to talk to. If I have to convince somebody, I want to talk to them. We have one judge in two of the cases that I tried last year who did not allow PowerPoints in the closing. The defense was lost because they need it. It's a crutch. I welcome it as an opportunity, and I tell juries, I'm now here to talk to you. And let's talk about what happened here. Let's talk about why this case deserves the imposition of punitive damages. Let's talk about why you can't talk back to me, but I'll bet you'll agree with me as I'm talking. And then I look people in the eye. I have 12 people to have a conversation with. That's much better. But if I have to use exhibits, and I have a lot of things to say, I will do it. If you have a case, like I had a case last year, where the device, this is not the Risperdal case, where the device in question, a transvaginal mesh device, has as a email embedded in the millions of documents that we have, an email from the inventor. And the inventor, did you hear this closing?
We heard it from Phil.
Okay, you heard from Phil. Well, Phil gave that closing, actually. Phil gave that closing in another case. A similar thing. And the inventor of the product says, on the day the product is launched on the market, to the world, for women in the world to implant when it never was tested in a human being before it's used. Imagine that. The inventor says, let me tell you the way I did it. I stood up in front of the jury in the opening statement. my opening statement, and I stood up, and I didn't get into the platitudes of anything else. I said, members of the jury, this is a device which I would like to say I would not want implanted in my own wife. Of course, people look at you and they think, like, what's he talking about? Him and his wife and everything. I'd say, I couldn't say that to you. I couldn't say that to you if I were talking about my own wife. But those are words you're going to see on an exhibit in this courtroom that are the words of the man who invented the product. That's how you win a case. And by the way, there's another way to do it, to convince the judge that you can put the email up on the screen. Okay? And then what do I get to say? Members of the jury, I'm going to show you this document. And then you're talking to the thing, and they're looking at their thing, what does it say? Why not tell it to them the way I told it to them? And I told it to them in the closing again. And by the way, in that exhibit, there are these grotesque, disgusting conversations among corporate executives and the French inventors of the product, making fun about when women have their uteruses and their literally the insides. Pardon me for being a little bit graphic. Vaginas destroyed by this device. There are these men who are talking about alternative modalities of sex. And by the way, the jury sees those documents, but I don't have to display them again to talk about them. I don't have to mention the words again. Those words penetrate the conscience of any person who's seen it once. So I don't have to go back in a closing to do that again. I just have to say the conduct is extraordinarily grotesque. Do I have to show a document again that I've already shown to penetrate the consciousness and to motivate a juror that the case deserves the imposition of punitive damages? I don't think so. That's exhibits. Questions?
Thank you.
He's out of here.
I got my facts.
Okay. Right.
Take care.
Take care. Thank you for coming. Thank you, 2Ls, for being here. Now we're going to tell secrets behind your back. Yes?
Do you have any upcoming trials where we can see you after?
Yeah, there is nothing I can tell you in the next literally two months, but if we keep track of that, and there will undoubtedly be mesh trials and or risperidol trials and other trials kind of sometime towards the summer. You can learn how, my assistant Lynn McCluskey is the one who knows where to do it, but Gwen always figures it out and then tells the trial ad students. You're welcome to be there. It's, I welcome it. I love when you all show up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Get your sweatshirts. Everybody should be wearing them. Hey.
You mentioned Courtroom Cowboy and Jim Beasley Sr. Can you tell us about your favorite case that you tried with Jim?
Yes. There were a number of them. Let me preface it. So Jim Beasley is an example of the kind of mentor that you want to have. If you want to be a great lawyer, and especially a great trial lawyer, then find yourself someone who you attach yourself to as a mentor, because there's no substitute for that. If you have extra time in your busy student life, show up at City Hall, find out who's trying a case, civil or criminal. There are a lot of terrific trial lawyers. Or go see a lousy one and figure out all the things that you wouldn't do. I learned a lot, I'll get to Jim Beasley, by watching good lawyering and by watching bad lawyering and being able to distinguish it. Let's see, there are a lot of great cases that I tried with Jim. I'll tell you about the first case I went to trial with Jim, or the second case. tell you about a case called Scarborough versus the Reading Railroad. I was a lawyer at the Beasley firm. Picture this. I clerked for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I clerked for a great justice whose name was Thomas Pomeroy. And one opening leads to another in life. Being a law clerk is a terrific way to get into the law profession. Clerking for a good judge is even better. And then I went to work in a place called Pottsville, Pennsylvania, and lasted there 9 months. Was given, you know the story too, was given the only ultimatum of a 32-year marriage. My wife died in 2004. She told me in 1979, when we were in Pottsville, if you're staying here, you're staying alone. So I decided to look for a job, and I ended up with Jim Beasley, and Jim was a unique lawyer, and Jim had a special way about him. I learned from Jim that I didn't want to be Jim. Jim was a street fighter. You can picture a guy who's 5'10", who wears a blue suit. I wear a black suit. Who wore yellow ties. Jim, by the way, was how many? I'm sure along the way you've heard Gwen's husband Andy talk. Andy's my law partner. Andy flew planes with and learned at the same from the same master. And but I didn't want to be Jim. Andy didn't want to be Jim either. We just wanted to know what was really great about what made Jim great in the courtroom. And one of the things about Jim was able to connect with a jury. Before I talk about one particular case, who asked the question? Who asked me you? Here's Jim in the courtroom. Jim would do something that was great, which I think is a great idea, which is to make the jury and you feel like you're part of them. He would have a conversation with them. And one thing Jim would do, he would lower his voice. I can remember like it was yesterday, and believe me, the year was 1980-some. Jim walked over to the jury, to the box, and he put his hands like this, and he would lean down. He would talk to you like you were family. And Jim then lowered his voice. And Jim said, you know what? He said, if you could, whatever he was saying at the time, believe that. These people, he said, it was like that. Over there. The defense lawyer stands up and says, I can't hear you, Mr. Beasley. I remember like it was yesterday. Jim looked over and he said, I wasn't talking to you. Now, that's an exaggeration. Don't try it. Your first trial, don't try it. It made an impact on me. Here's the impact it made. I actually did it then. Like, I cheated one day and did it. Like, after you practice 30-some years, try it on for yourself because you know you can get away with it. And you know, like, but I didn't do it for the first 30 years, but it was a good Jim story. My first job that I was given by Jim, it was like, I remember like it was yesterday. Somebody had just brought in a file. The case was Scarborough versus the Reading Railroad and the city of Philadelphia. When are we going to go till about 7 or thereabouts? Okay, we got some time. Good. I'm having fun. If you're not, and you're embarrassed to leave, you can like make an excuse. But Jim, so you didn't know I'd be this much fun. So, neither did you. Jim calls me in. Oh, by the way, I don't barely know which side of the courtroom to go on, and a whole lot of other things that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know any of those things. We went to trial the first day. I went to work with Jim on a different trial, but I don't want to talk about that. So Jim hands me a file and he says to me, Tom, this case involves a little kid in North Philly. By the way, in terms of facts that you never forget, the incident occurred at 12th and McFerrin Streets at the end of where a residential neighborhood dead ends, and there was a fence and there was a hole in the fence. And little Eddie Scarborough went under the fence, like kids will do, and went down, and there was a passing freight train, and guess what Eddie did? Tried to hop the train, and slid under the train, and ended up as I recall it, bilateral amputee. And Jim handed me the file, since you wanted this thing in the story. Jim handed me the file and said to me, Tom, we now have this case, we represent this kid. I don't think he had a name, like just getting the file in the associate's hands so some real work could get done on it. We now represent this kid, and he was represented by some other lawyer who took his deposition and he lied. Call up the lawyer and call up the defense lawyer, tell him the kid lied, and then you're going to produce the kid for a deposition next week so you can straighten out his testimony. As though this is what you do every day in the plaintiff's office. Like you just do it. Like that's the first, literally pretty much the first task, or near first task, or one of the first tasks I was assigned. I give myself a little room. And I did it because I was told to do it. That was my job. So I called him up, produced Eddie. Little Eddie no longer had the story that was concocted, which I can't remember, but made no sense. He said he went under the train. And Jim taught me a lesson. Jim said, whatever the cards are that you're dealt, deal with the cards. Don't try to fix the cards. Just try to fix the argument to the cards that you're dealt. It's a good thing to know. Years later, literally decades later, I was examining the product line developer for the drug Risperdal, who was a man from Belgium, who spoke literal English. People whose second language is English don't know colloquialisms, don't know lingo, if you will. They know pure translations. And I remember using that all those decades later when I suggested to this very literal, very serious Belgian man, I said, you stacked the deck. And he said, stack? It's on videotape, by the way, if you don't believe me. He said, stacked deck? I said, you know, you play the cards you dealt. Because our accusation was they fixed the data. And he said, dealt, hand, fix. So I learned that sort of along the way from Jim Beasley. But that's the first case. We went to court with Eddie Scarborough, and the star witness in that case, it's in the Beasley book, by the way, since we turned this into all about Jim, which is fine with me. But it's in Courtroom Cowboy. The star witness in that case was the late controversial mayor of the city of Philadelphia, former police commissioner, Frank Rizzo. I was in Jim's office, and remember it like it was yesterday, and Jim was in a position in his life and in his law practice to pick up the phone and get the former mayor on the line, who was running for mayor. And Jim said, Mayor, I want to have you come in and testify in this case. There was a hole at the end of the street, at the end of 13th and McFerrin, and police officers have an obligation to, by the way, you can assess this on causation in case it's like a final examination in torts. Jim said to him, there was a hole in the fence, and the hole in the fence should have been fixed because some police officers should have seen that hole in the fence if they were patrolling properly. And police regulation 38 says police officers must report any unsafe condition. You know the story? You know the story too. And they didn't do it. And we called the mayor, the former mayor of the city. My job, like I was the kid, my job was make sure the mayor got there, that he didn't leave, that he didn't get crazed, and that was the story. So that's the first trial. Keep me going, yeah.
When did you know that you were ready to branch out and start your own firm?
That's also a great question. And by the way, one of the things I hope to do is to convince my law partner, Shane Inspector, who has at a number of law schools, including Berkeley and Stanford, and because I've seen him do it, and Hastings and Penn, has given a 3-part lecture to kind of their student trial lawyer groups entitled How to Start a Law Practice, and this is part of it. So if he's encouraged, I'll bet you could get Shane in here, and we'll buy the Chinese food again. Kline Inspector is great at buying Chinese food. I got this idea from Shannon, who buys the Chinese food and students come. We were practicing law for Beasley. My law partner Shannon and I became best friends along the way. And we left in 1995. And we did it not for monetary reasons, but for professional reasons. A lot of people leave law firms because they're not making enough money, they feel they're not being treated fairly. We just wanted to go out on our own and have our own practice. And we went in and we told Jim we were leaving. Gwen's husband Andy has a completely different story. He left after Jim died. And we had made a decision professionally. The truth, like truth be told, I think this will be in the book, is that I had had a very large jury verdict by those standards in that era in a case involving a prescription drug that we believed caused birth defects in children when moms took it for morning sickness, a drug called Bendectin. It was an unrelenting, unforgiving, and in some ways ruthless project, but I learned a lot, and I tried a lot of cases. Tried 5 of those cases to jury verdicts. And in one of them, I got a very large jury verdict, and Jim was largely disinterested in my success in it. And it hurt me, actually. And I just felt that I wanted to move on. That's the truth of that. That's kind of the truth. Everyone has those inflection points in their careers and in their life, and that was mine. And we decided largely that we wanted to control our own destiny. What we did not expect was that we'd have a firm of 40 sub-lawyers. And that's kind of a whole different story. Yeah.
So saying he was disinterested, what, I guess what reaction did you want in your
Love. There's nothing, by the way, it's free. In my generation, like free love was like the the 60s, Woodstock. Your parents or grandparents would know about it. And I just, truly, like I thought, and by the way, we have a culture in our firm. Life is full of lessons. Priscilla knows this well. Britt knows how it works as well. If somebody gets there's some accomplishment, we want to talk about it. We want to have champagne. We want to go out for happy hour. If you run a firm, that's a great thing. You didn't ask this question, either of you, but it's kind of an important one, I think. Partnerships have their own dynamics and their own difficulties and their own joys and dynamics. And if you go into a partnership, make sure that you're going into the partnership with the right person. Choose your law partner like you would choose your spouse. That's, trust me, good advice. And look ahead and say, if you're deciding you're going to set up shop, whether you're practicing law 0 years, because you will have a law license, and you will be able to hang out a shingle, and or if you decide to do it 10 years down the road, look 20 years down the road, and say, where's that person going to be, and where do I think I'm going to be? Look at the person that you think your law partner is going to be in choosing a law partner, that to me is a kind of a lesson that I've learned to the positive in my instance. Yes.
How do you think your experience teaching before you went to law school applies to your practice today?
It is the single most important thing that I have done in my professional life before becoming a lawyer, by far. Teaching sixth graders is the greatest and best laboratory for communicating with jurors. Not because jurors are like sixth graders, but because you learn how to present and distill things in a fashion that can be understood by your audience. You have to know your audience. And in my law practice, look, I've tried slip and fall cases and rear end collisions and cases which aren't very complicated. But I've also tried cases that involve really complicated facts that it's just been the best thing that I've ever done. I literally use it every day. It's not just lip service. It has to do with there's something about it that always takes me back there. And I do not miss an opportunity to tell a jury about it. Not that they're like sixth graders, but there's just something about me that says it. Yeah.
Angela McMarkle, besides a strong presence in the courtroom, what do you look for when you're hiring people to your firm?
Academics, first and foremost. It's nearly impossible to get in our door without high academics, and then the rest of it really flows. It's really important to us that someone be able to present themselves and appear in court. We put a high premium, and Priscilla knows this firsthand. We put a very high premium on having a diverse and eclectic group of people. We have 5 physician lawyers. We have many women. We have Latino and Hispanic lawyers, because we believe that we have blonde lawyers too. We believe that we.
I'm too.
Yeah, she is too. Yeah, but exactly. Checks a lot of boxes. And I believe that you don't want people around you who think, and Shana believes this too, who think like you and are you. I don't want in our law office 40-some mini-me's. Gwen's husband Andy's a great example in our firm of someone who has his own unique style, way, brand, I might add fiery, competitive approach, which is great. But the people who work in his group are also different than him, and so it's all of those things are important. But top of the list, hate to disappoint you, but top of the list are academics, because we have found that there is a correlation between academic performance in law school and performance as a lawyer, believe it or not. Having said that, if you graduate in the bottom of the class, you can do great too. But that's what we Honest Engine look at. Sure. Does that surprise you?
No.
Yes.
My name's Corey. I'm A1L. Obviously, we heard your accolades.
How's it going?
Good. We heard your accolades. You have a very successful career. What's one of the challenges you faced throughout your career? And what did you do to overcome it?
No. What do you think, Zach? If you ask somebody, ask your son. He may be able to tell you. Challenges. Not alcohol, not although those are serious problems in the profession. I've come to believe you need a lot of sleep, but that's a separate issue to talk about. I don't want to tell you that this all came natural, and that it all was a bowl of cherries, and that it was a straight rise to the top. But I just remember getting up every day and going to work and working hard, like I did today. If I can switch gears on you a little bit, I believe that there is a great benefit in not taking yourself too seriously. I think lawyers and other professionals just take themselves too seriously. They don't want to laugh at themselves. They don't want to laugh at situations. They just want to, win. And I think I got over that. I think that if you have a measure of success, and again, I don't profess greatness. I just say that if you have a measure of success, then and you have self-confidence, you build on that to be able to do it. But I just believe it's a grind. I tell lawyers who come to our office, some brand new lawyers and some who have had experience, but especially newer lawyers, newer graduates, that this, I told Phil Pascarella this, that it's not all glory. It looks like it's a glory, but it is not. I mean, it is, in addition to the grind of emails, which are the greatest oppression in the human race, but in addition to the grind, the constant perpetual motion, probably the greatest challenge by far is to find an appropriate balance between work life and your professional life. And if you were to say to me challenges, I sure didn't get it perfect. And especially when I was a younger lawyer, I certainly didn't get it perfect. And interestingly, and maybe with age comes a little bit of wisdom, I have a 40-year-old, if that counts to be mid-career, it's kind of approaching mid-career, trial lawyer, son-in-law, as I'm fond of calling him the father of my grandchildren. and he works all the time. I have a joke in our household, Merson Law.
24/7.
24/7, and the kids could be playing. He'll be doing. I mean, he's in the grind, and I saw myself in that. I mean, but I didn't see myself in that when I was 40 years old and 10 years into this. That's after taking some time to answer the question. That's where I'd settle on the answer. Although if I'd had a rehearsal, I would have gotten to it sooner. Yes.
Thanks, Alan. Also, I'm curious what made you want to become more involved with the law school. I know you said, I know Jim Beasley, obviously the Temple, what you want to do that.
Yeah, perceptive. I was motivated by Jim. Is like honest engine. I thought what Jim did was great. I was motivated. There was a beauty contest more or less between here and my alma mater, because after all, you usually name your alma mater, not like someplace at 33rd and Market that you rarely set foot in. Gwen kind of introduced me to this whole place. Zach went here when it was some iteration of Earl Mack and or the Drexel School of Law, and I just thought that this, number one, I wanted to be someplace where I could feel and touch and hopefully be part of. I wanted to be in a place where there were, I'd use the word kids, but I'd get thrown out, where there were students who I thought were like me. I came from my dad was a manager of a dress factory. My mom was a homemaker. And I thought that this to some extent approximated my experience. I wanted something that was new and was on the rise. Drexel honestly just checked all of the boxes that I had in mind, and I was interested in law school education. I thought that I would be able to do it, and I can't tell you how it feels, how great it feels when I'm out and about. I walk the streets of Philadelphia. I go to Sixers and Phillies games, and somebody comes up to me and says, "I graduated from your law school." The faculty doesn't see it that way, by the way. This is the faculty's law school, trust me.
These guys love it.
And it is. It is. That's what a school's all about, faculty and students. And I got to the. It's just great to me. When I see some of the things that we do, and it doesn't matter. I talk to graduates of this law school, and they tell me I work at the Social Security Administration. That's great. I work at the Defender's Office. That's great. I work at some what we in my day called silk stocking or white shoe law firms, whose names change by the day as they're gobbled up by other bigger corporate law firms. And I think great. It is meaningful to me. Meaningful to me. As I like to say, you're all stuck with my name on your diploma. So you kind of have a hard time erasing it. So but you should know that the person who did that, or at least gave something, means something. Part of establishing this group, and I do hope people come back. And like I said, I'll come back as many times as you want me. But I think that that being a plaintiff's lawyer is just a great opportunity to change people's lives and change the life of the community and of the nation in the fundamental and extraordinary ways. And so all of that fits together for me. Make sense or not? Or should I take it back? Because maybe I should ask for a refund. Other questions? Yeah.
My name is Katie Barlow. I'm a 1L.
Did you have fun, by the way? Or?
I'm having a great time.
Okay, good.
My question is, what do you think is the preeminent threat or challenge facing our profession and our ability to be advocates, and what do you see the role of young lawyers in sort of helping curb that issue?
There is a existential threat to the rights and liberties of Americans today. And if you can't see it, then pick your nose out of your law books for 45 minutes and turn on the news. Now, I don't want to get political, but it's just a fact. And you can label it in whatever way you see it and whatever way you see life through and politics through. And by the way, trial lawyers are political in nature because we have to be, because we need to protect and guard the courthouse door. Every day there's some right, there's some liberty, there's some access to the courts which someone is trying to deny. They're currently, the current, and it goes in cycles, and it goes in genres, and then you read about it in your textbooks. But for example, preemption. How many have heard of the concept of preemption? Yeah. I mean, preemption, if you preempt a lawsuit because it's federally regulated, you don't have a right to redress. Arbitration clauses. How many read the contracts that you sign? How many have a bank account here? How many have read the contract that you signed that says you cannot sue? That says you cannot sue the bank unless they, depending on the iteration of the contract, have conducted themselves in a willful and wanton misconduct. Did you know that and then there are caps on damages, which I've spent now half of my legal career trying to fight, and I'm not going to rest well, maybe they'll be there sometime. But I'm not going to until we have another challenge case coming to the cap, because that fight's not over. Amtrak, after that horrific accident, which took the lives of all of those people and maimed and destroyed the lives of so many other people, you know what Amtrak's answer to that whole thing was? After they paid their cap minus a discount for the value, the time value of money, after, by the way, this is advertisement, that never would have happened. The cap was $200 million, and through some good timing, good fortune, and advocacy out of the courtroom, I'm a believer that we need to be advocates in the courtroom and out of the courtroom. Advocacy means in the public, court of public opinion, not just in the courthouse. AAJ, who is the sponsor organization of all of this, get your sweatshirts and wear them. I'm going to wear mine and post them on social media. I'm going to do that with mine. We raised the cap. We got Congress to essentially make the amount of money that people could be compensated from $200 million to $300 million. That's a short version of a longer story. And by the way, that ended up being just about half of the real damages that were assessed by a federal judge. So every person who was injured, as a federal judge saw the case, was given 50 cents on the dollar. Fair? Justice? No, we got every measure of justice we could get in that lawsuit over 253 people who were injured. And you know what Amtrak's answer was? Do you think I believe any of this? Yeah, you know what Amtrak's answer has been? You don't know this. How many have been on an Amtrak train in the past month or two or three? Okay. Did you know that your ticket now takes away your legal right to sue Amtrak? How many knew that, Amtrak riders? It says that you need to arbitrate. You need to go to arbitration. Your right to go to court to sue a repeated tortfeasor has been stripped from you. And you know what we're doing? This has nothing to do with making any more money in any cases. What we're doing is fighting back. We have the families of people who died, people who were catastrophically injured, are writing letters to Congress. It's being organized and orchestrated. By the way, you're going to be able to report back. Tom was really good at this. Through AAJ, you have to be organized, and you have to be political, and you have to take the causes up because the court system is under assault every day. And that's what I spend time on. By the way, I unabashedly am involved with my fellow trial lawyers in political activity. Why? Because we believe that you need to have judges who are elected in Pennsylvania who are not going to be for the plaintiff, who are going to be fair, who are not going to be owned by corporate interest. That's all of the stuff, by the way, that we do in the other 24 hours in a day. Seriously. That's the biggest threat. There is, I repeat so you can put it in your mind. No one's taking notes here, but write it down as a mental note. There is an existential threat to the civil justice system in America. That's just a fact. And it's not going to get any better anytime soon. And in order to fight back, you need to be organized. In order to be organized, you need an organization, locally and nationally. And let me make one other pitch, because there are too few lawyers elected to our legislative branches. There are too few lawyers in the Pennsylvania State Legislature. There are too few lawyers in Congress. If there were more lawyers, we'd be in a different spot. But that's all changed. But before your lifetime, in more or less your parents' lifetimes. So thank you for putting me on the soapbox, because that's really at the fundamentals and at the core. You can't have justice if you can't have access. You can't have access if the rules are written against you. And every chipping away, every time a state says a medical malpractice case is limited to $250,000, it destroys legal rights. California, a liberal bastion, you would think, has a limitation in any medical malpractice case of $250,000 for non-economic damages. That is to say, pain and suffering and damages of those sorts, in case you weren't paying attention when they were teaching damages when Professor Geisinger was teaching that to you. In any event, you have to see it for what it is. And you know what happens in that state? People go without redress. You know why? Because back to economics. Try to remember who's asked the questions. Why and how do you take a case? How does a good lawyer take a case where it's going to cost $100,000 to litigate and the most he can get is $250,000? Someone who's misdiagnosed with cancer, who's a retired person, has no economic damages, and goes for a mammogram and the mammogram is misread. I've handled that case many times, too many times. And a woman goes on to die and she leaves young children, or she leaves adult children and grandchildren. And it's all a doctor's mistake, and there's no economic damages. And then you're told, oh, your case is worth nothing, or maybe $250,000, and she tries to find a lawyer. Laws matter. It matters what the laws are, and if they change the law, to use a phrase I went back to earlier, they stack the deck. And if the deck is stacked, then you are, to use a legal term, the plaintiff, to use a legal term, is screwed. Really, really, that's how it works. So when you read about all of these balancing tests, go back to Paul's graph. Go back to Paul's graph for a minute. I get a once-a-year invitation to come in and talk about Paul's graph. I mean, there was a judge who made a decision that there was going to be no duty, and no duty was tort reform. Yeah, how many know the expression tort reform? That came in the parlance of the 1980s, 1990s, when corporate interests banded together. How many know that Philadelphia has been called a judicial hellhole? How many? Do you know why? Because there's a group called the American Tort Reform Association. You know who they are? Those are large corporate interests, big tobacco, big pharma, big everybody else who doesn't want to fess up or pay up for injuries that they've sustained, and or that they've inflicted on other people. And so they go about the public relations propaganda of dubbing places hellholes to intimidate the judiciary and to brand jurisdictions in a fashion that they can hopefully get the judges to change their rulings and the legislatures to change the laws. That's like cold hard reality, now that we're really friends. And how many think that's right? Yeah, that's right. That's the answer. No hands. Next question. A couple more, you'll let you out of here. Yes. You're still having fun?
My name's Anna, and I'm a Hall State alumna. I just want to know, how did you know that you wanted to be a pathologist? Like, was there a point in time when you're like, this is it, this is what I want to do?
Well, in talking to the author about the book, kind of trying to figure it out retrospectively, like, how did I want to be a trial lawyer? I can kind of give you, I don't know that it was all conscious. As I said, my dad was a factory manager. I grew up in a small town. Like, I knew there were lawyers. It seemed like something that was better than carrying bundles from the buttonhole machine, the button-making machine to the buttonhole machine. It seemed a lot better than putting plastic bags over dresses. It seemed better than working in the supermarket where I worked. it seemed like a lot better. So but I did have this sense. So I grew up in what they describe in the articles as a hard scrabble town. Hard scrabble. How many heard the term hard scrabble? Yeah, like that's not in the lexicon anymore. Yay. And so I was influenced by a lot of things that I saw where a lot of people either were afflicted with bad things that happened to them or in industrial accidents. I saw in my dad's factory. We had what we in those days called a double house, and Pop, not satisfied to rent out the other side, divided it in two, so we had 2 apartments to rent out because the economics were better. People who lived in the top floor, he worked in a beryllium plant. Beryllium is a toxic metal which wreaked havoc with workers who weren't given proper protection, dust protection. They had beryllium poisoning and died. I saw that. I saw a lot of what I thought were injustices. Can I draw the line from there to here? No, but I think that when I went to work for Jim Beasley, which had kind of a whole other story, how I kind of sort of ended up there. We left off in Pottsville in 1979, and Paula told me that you or me, like, pick your poison. We had a 9-month-old, by the way, and I thought, might as well not break up the family. And she said to me, why don't you apply for a job with that guy who you said was the great lawyer who argued the case in the Supreme Court. I happen to be a law clerk. I happen to see Beasley argue. And so to get her off my back, I sent a letter to Beasley. I was doing labor law in Pottsville. But I did have a sense, sensible enough to know that he was a great lawyer. That I knew. I was warned by a friend of mine that he would, quote, chew you up and spit you out. And it wouldn't take much time. But I knew that he did great work. And I heard him argue. I was kind of motivated by that. But I also wanted to be on this side, not that side, all my life. Like, I just knew instinctively. The first day that I went to teach school, I didn't go into the classroom. I walked a picket line. And did you know that story? Did you know that story?
I did not know.
Yeah, how about that? How's that for street cred? Like, if I want to run for the Democratic nomination for something, man, that's a box checker if I've ever seen it. Yeah, it's a true story. I kind of thought that was right. I never wanted to be for them. Last point. When I had the ultimatum in my life, which has become a focal point of tonight's discussion, I could have gone back to Pittsburgh, because I was in law school in Pittsburgh, and I had made connections. And I could have gone back to work in a municipal practice, in a large insurance defense firm, and another place, neither of which seemed like attractive work to me. And when I was in Pottsville representing Schuylkill County in defending prison guards who weren't like the best of the lot, I knew I didn't want to do that either. Yes?
Was there ever a point in your career up until now where you kind of like second-guessed yourself? You kind of thought maybe, I don't want to be an attorney, or wasn't like a case that made you second-guess yourself?
I congratulate the questions because they've all been great, and yours is too. I start with the proposition that many lawyers are not happy. Did you know that fact? Like, no. Like, if you think you're unhappy now, just wait. Just wait. Britt, who does social media, will tell you that. Zach, who is a professional playwright, will tell you
Don't worry,
that.
writers are no happier. Don't become a playwright.
Don't become a playwright. Okay. Okay, I learned something. We'll do a psychoanalysis of that later. She'll tell you it's all happy, all happy, because Priscilla's a happy person. But here's so you start with that. And by the way, there's a great empirical study, I always like to cite it, there are a couple of them, and they lead to the same conclusion, which is lawyers who do good are happier than lawyers who make money. Now, I'm not saying you can't do both, and I'm living proof of that. But I do believe as long as you make it, you might as well give it away. I believe in that too. And so that is a fact. Public interest lawyers are the happiest, according to the studies. People who are in the grind of billing their hours are the most unhappy. By the way, that's not to say if you get offered a job for $200,000 to start that you might not take it. But then again, there are choices that you have to make in life, and just like the partner you're looking at, you got to look at where am I going to be 20 years from now, and that's a decision that you have to make. You have to decide what your comfort level is. Some people are in the zone and out of the zone. So that's unhappy lawyers. Me, since you asked about me, and I took the liberty to diverge from the question like most witnesses. And if I were you and I stopped now, you'd say, but Tom, I didn't ask you that. Me, I never looked back. Those who know me and who've lived with me and who really know me, I just, and I don't know that I characterize myself as happy warrior, because who was the politician who was the happy warrior? It wasn't. It was. I can picture him. But anyway, that's before your time too. I would. I just always liked what I was doing, and I always. But I think the satisfaction was knowing that I was truly doing some good. When you're in the Institute building next, I know there's a lot to digest in that exhibit, and I'm sure you've all spent hours in there. But look at, there's a letter. There's advocacy remedy. Under the remedy panel, there's a letter. There's a picture of me, a much younger me, with a little boy who's clearly very injured. And there's a letter from the mom who wrote it to me. And I've always thought that the best gift that you can ever get from a client, best gift, is a letter, now maybe an email or a text that tells you how you've changed their life. And she goes on to explain in this letter, who's read it? That'll let me know if somebody who's read it. No, none of you. Somebody who's actually read it. Don't count. She goes on. She says in the letter to me. She introduced me. By the way, this is a client. See, everybody who really knows me knows that, like, I fall in love with them. I fall in love with some causes. I fall in love with the clients. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. As long as you understand that you have a clinical obligation to be a lawyer, it's okay to fall in love with them. That particular client introduced me to bread making machines, and I got a bread making machine that lasted 20, almost 30 years until it finally broke. That old Zorage machine. You know that machine? I was so sad. Like the day it died, like a piece of me died. And she says in the letter, people look around and they say, we live in this big house, and we have a Sprinter van, and that's a Mercedes in case you missed that. And we have a pool. And the letter says, but what they don't know is that Jonathan needs aquatic therapy. Jonathan needs to have a big home with ramps. Somebody else's, and this is a pretty good paraphrase of it, somebody else's luxury is our necessity, and you got it to us. And by the way, she adds in the letter, for good measure. So, Tom, when you think about us, sue the bastards. Take everything you can from them. And, you know, that's one of the things that motivates me. And I have, we over the years, I've been like in a lot of, they're causes. I mean, like, I like to not call them causes, but they're causes. I've been texting back and forth. So we had the first bellwether trial in Risperdal. Risperdal is an antipsychotic drug described, I'm mindful of our time, described by the Food and Drug Administration as an adult prescribed antipsychotic medication equivalent to a chemical straitjacket. Okay? How many know the drug? And the drug, interestingly, is a drug of choice, or pretty much, in prisons, because it makes you, by the way, gain weight, be lethargic, sleepy. Man, those people are perfect if they're come in and they're violent offenders. That makes sense. They're prescribing it, and they are promoting it illegally for children. We tried the first bellwether trial. Involved a autistic young man whose name is Austin Pledger. And they are from literally the backwoods of Alabama. And after a 5-year battle, we ended up transferring some of Johnson & Johnson's wealth to the Pledger boy through his legally appointed guardian in a special needs trust. A lot of lessons in there, like if you want to pick those little things apart. And I got an email the other day about the new house that is being purchased with Austin's trust, so that he can live in there, so that he can get some enjoyment out of life. And his mom, Benita, who I text with regularly, sends me photos of him. He calls me Mr. Tom. He's barely verbal, calls me Mr. Tom. And that makes your heart swell. And that's kind of what makes me tick. I actually represent, you haven't asked this question, but in terms of this whole discussion, I represent Jim and Evelyn Piazza, who, has anyone heard them speak in any of their speaking tours? They are just, I've represented people who have allowed me to make causes out of their crises, but they have just become the most remarkable advocates for reforming fraternity and sorority Greek life. How many were Greeks in your undergraduate iteration? And they've done just such a remarkable job turning their son's death into something, to coin my phrase, where something good could come out of something bad. They have single-handedly changed I call myself the third wheel on the bicycle. They come to me when they need guardrails, because you need a lawyer to tell you what the guardrails are. And that occasionally has taken us to the courthouse in Bellefonte, Center County, to defend them against the gag order that they have in effect. But that's also part of being a lawyer and representing people. But they have taken something and they have changed the discourse about it in America. And it's a tough discussion, because you all know what it's really like. And don't tell me you don't know, because you do. And they've tried to change destructive and dangerous behavior into constructive behavior through a constructive discussion. And they decided, we're not going to hate fraternities and sororities. We're not going to hate Greek life. We're going to embrace it. We're going to try to make universities own it. We're going to try to make people come to terms with and recognition and police it and police themselves and develop a new culture that can come out of it. And I've talked a lot about it, but they talk about it with the passion of somebody who's lost a son. I never knew him. Jim Piazza came to me. He's the most interesting man. He came to me in an interview with a bunch of other, against other lawyers. I told you that over an hour ago. So maybe that means we're nearing the end. And he looked me in the eye. I mean, imagine this as a prospective client. Most clients, they want you, they sign the fee agreement. By the way, you go to the client, there's an expression in my world, did you get the client signed up? That's plaintiffs' lawyers want to have a contingent fee contract with their clients. But he asked me a question. He said, it was something like this. I want you to go home. I want you to think about this. If you're going to be my lawyer, quoting him, I want you to be all in. And I want you to make that commitment to me. All in. And I kind of thought, look, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And that's what he's saying now. But time passes. People get on with their lives. They want a pound of flesh now, and they want $1 million tomorrow. But boy, he meant it. And they have literally held America's feet to the fire. And if you can be along that journey, they'll get you up every morning energized. And before the clock turns over to tomorrow, I'll get a text from Jim. He'll be talking about something. I was at the Sixers game last night, and a man who I know came over to me. He's actively involved in Greek life, and he's trying to put together Penn, Drexel, St. Joe's, and have a symposium. He, of course, said to me in the context of the conversation, I want you to help sponsor it, and that's fine. But he wants to get them to speak, and they draw crowds of 2,000 in an auditorium. And people want to hear the story and want to know what happened. And by the way, that family could have filed a lawsuit, collected the money from Penn State, which we had a settlement with Penn State, collected the money from the Beta Theta fraternity, which we've already done, but that's not it for them. And that's the kind of thing that, as a plaintiff's lawyer, 41 years later, that's what gets me up in the morning. That's honest engine. I think I've exhausted you. You haven't exhausted me. I can go on. Anybody have any must question, like I really want Tom to answer it? Yeah.
Your success, because of your success, do you have to sign the same bank form that takes you right to arbitration, or do you like to do that?
Life is a negotiation. The answer is, if you want me to, I will actually email or text me. I'm easy to find, tom.kline@klinespector.com, 215-407-1360. And I will send you the bank form with the provision willful and wanton stricken, ordinary negligence put into it. If you're a big enough customer, you can do this. There is, but you don't have that economic leverage. So I would have to go look. I don't know that we struck arbitration, although frankly, our view of that with a bank was that in the correct forum would be okay. But I definitely know I will not agree that you can do anything you want negligently to me, and you're not going to be responsible, and you're going to hold my clients millions and millions and millions of dollars. Ain't going to happen. So, but most people don't know that. Your credit card's like that. We are moving, and by the way, it's everything in that world, back to the soapbox for a minute, everything about that is gussied up as reform. It's not reform, it's deform. They are deforming the American justice system. And so every time you get your rights taken away, don't tell me that it's a convenient and efficient manner to resolve a dispute. Same with your stock brokerage form. How do I solve it with the stock brokerage house? Don't have a stock brokerage account. That's how you do that. So yeah, I try to practice what I preach. Try. Not always successful. Thank you for having me. If you don't wear your black fleece that says Kline School of Law AAJ chapter tomorrow, the next day you can wash them. I washed mine. But thanks for the audience. I'm around. I'm not hard to find. Kevin knows that.
True.
Take care.